Hi, I'm Kenna F, and I'm an alcoholic. Nice to be with you guys. Yeah, really nice to be here. I want to thank Megan and Drew for hosting me, my friend Mary, for driving down from Humboldt, and Kiki for picking a great restaurant for lunch, and life is in session. I have a great big full life, and I'm delighted about that. It doesn't mean it's perfect. I didn't come to AA in 1985, and I thought sobriety would be like I'd live in Snow White's cottage and the bluebirds would tie my dressing gown every morning, and it hasn't quite been like that. There's moments like that, but I have a good life in good times and bad, definitely. And I want to welcome the people that are new here, how well I remember, counting those days and what that was like. And I always remember I got sober in Honolulu in 1985, like I said, and I'd been to a few meetings and I heard about a big book and I thought, I'm going to really show how sincere I am and go to the headquarters. And I took the bus to the Honolulu central office and I'd like to buy a big book. And they said, are you new? And I said, no, I have 17 days. And that was their response. And I still don't think it's that funny to tell you the truth. That isn't a long time between cocktails. In fact, it was an impossible time between cocktails. And something was happening to me when I started hanging around with you guys. And it's been happening all these 40 years. Just say, I retired on Friday and I am exhausted. So it's super emotional and, a lot of packing and moving and stuff and boxes and yeah, so we'll see what happens tonight, but I just kind of wanted to get that out of the way. I was born in Santa Cruz, born and raised in Santa Cruz, and beautiful place to grow up. Very fortunate to have grown up there. I come from an alcoholic home. It certainly wasn't the worst alcoholic home, but our Christmas lights were up all year. The trash cans were out all week. Sometimes the lights would be cut off or the phone. There'd be broken windows. Occasionally, my dad might be in jail. He'd be all beat up, or you just kind of never. Or sometimes it would just be like fun and hilarious. You kind of never knew what it's alcoholism, right? And a lot of secrets. Sometimes it felt very dark and heavy in there. And as a kid, it didn't really feel like there was much solid ground, right, to put your feet on. And where I found the solid ground for me was at the Catholic school that I went to. And I'm not recovering from that experience. And I recognize that many people had horrific experiences, but in the Catholic school system, I happen to have a very positive one. And in some ways, I think it really saved me. The priests and the nuns in our parish were good examples of love and service. And I got a good education there. And I loved the God that I was introduced to there. It meant something to me. And it gave me a place to stand in the world. That faith meant a lot to me. And that connection that I had with the God that I was introduced to there. And I mention that because that whatever it seems is nearest and dearest to you, alcoholism is going to demand that from you. And I had to lay that down at the feet of alcoholism, that connection with that God, that faith, because of the actions I was taking as an alcoholic young woman. And that was a really, really painful thing for me. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. My dad moved out when I was, 8 or so. He didn't go far. He moved in down the street with another woman and her kids. And yeah, that's never funny in an Al-Anon meeting, by the way. It's only funny in an AA meeting, but. And leaving my mom, the librarian, with these 4 kids to raise. Blessedly, my grandfather was sober. He had gotten sober way up in Humboldt County. My dad's side of the family is all from Humboldt and Del Norte County. And he got sober in Eureka sometime in the 1940s. And I don't know how I got behind the redwood curtain when it was like a decade old. And Mary and I are working on figuring that out, looking at the history up there. But someone carried the message to my grandfather, and in his way, he carried it to me. I was 14 when he passed away. I was just starting to drink. However, when my dad left, it was my grandfather who put braces on my teeth and helped my mom pay the tuition at the Catholic school that I went to, and helped her make those house payments. And had he not been sober, things might have been quite different. And so, you were working in my life before I even knew that I needed you. And I didn't know my grandfather was in AA. I just knew that he used to be like my dad, and he wasn't anymore. And he was kind of sparkly. And he gave us a place. He had a place up in Redway, the little town where my friend Mary lives. On the very street where Mary lives, my grandfather's place was. And so that was on the river there. So my mom had a place to take her kids for a vacation a couple times a year. And my debt to A is very deep and wide. And I always say this. So when I graduated from that Catholic school, the high school had closed, unfortunately. And so I was only able to go there for 8 years. But my mother had gone there, and my grandmother and my great grandmother, we had deep roots in that parish. And I loved it. And the morning after my graduation, my mom was at the kitchen table. She had my diploma, and I'd won some little pins. And she said to me, Kenna, I finally got my scholar. And about a year and a half or 2 years later, I'm in front of my mom again, and things are a little different because I'd started to drink. I'm now behind the counter at the Winter Schnitzel. I'm working there full time. I've dropped out of high school with a 0.8 GPA, and my mom has shown up there because one more time I hadn't made it home the night before, and she's trying to see if her kid is okay. And she was standing in front of me that day, and I'm sick and hungover and deeply ashamed, and saying, I don't understand what has happened to you. You used to be so active. And she meant in our parish. And I said those things that we say when we're defending our right to drink, because alcohol fixes something in me that I need fixing. And I'm willing to pay a high price to have that fixing done. And, I said, whatever it takes to make you go away, get out of here, leave me alone. You don't care. I can't stand to see that look on your face. And, I can remember, and I didn't mean to be doing those things, right? But I'm an alcoholic, and I one more time hadn't made it home the night before. I'm in the clothes the night before. I'm sick and shaking. Some guy's dropping me off. And we drove down our street. It was a cold, foggy morning in Santa Cruz, and my mom's car was still in the driveway. She hadn't gone to work yet. And by that time in the house, my older siblings were gone. It was my mom and my grandmother and myself. And I cannot go in there past my mom and my grandmother and do that walk of shame. And, where nothing would be said. And I'm not thinking about letting my mom know that her 15, 16-year-old daughter is alive, right? I'm thinking about me. And I had that guy drop me off around the corner that day. And I sat on the curb, sick and shaking. And finally, when I saw her car leave for work, I went in the house, and there was a note from her on the refrigerator that said, don't you realize what it does to me when you do this? And of course I did, but I am powerless to stop. And I had taken my first geographic and went off to Honolulu. Seemed like my friends could party on the weekends, ended up back at school. That wasn't happening for me. And I didn't want to be unlearned. I didn't want to be, uneducated. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to build a life, but I am not, I am powerless, and I am not in control of my life. But I thought, what, it's probably Santa Cruz. If I can go somewhere where I don't know anyone, I didn't know I was taking a geographic, but I'll go someplace. If I don't have any friends there, then I'll go to school, I'll do the right thing. And so I moved over to Honolulu. My older sister is living there. She's not much older. She's 6 years older than me, and she was 18 or 19. And she's an alcoholic, sober today, but not at that time. And she had a baby that she was raising on her own. And so I move in with my sister, and I am in high school, and it seemed like the same people that were at Kaiser High or that were at Santa Cruz High are at Kaiser High. And I'm off and running again. And we ended up losing our apartment, and we were unhoused for a time. And what I remember about that was how nobody was happy to see us coming. These 2 teenage girls and a baby and some food stamps. And I'm not going to school now because I don't even know where I'm sleeping that night. And just to make that, eventually we did find a place, but by now I'm pregnant, and I terminated that pregnancy, and now I've done an unfixable thing, and I'm a bad girl, and I've got a secret. And I'm not here to moralize about that for anybody, but it had been a year or so before that, maybe 2 years, that I've been confirmed in the Catholic Church and that faith that mattered to me. And now there's that permanent severance I cannot turn in that direction of that God that was such a comfort to me. And off I wander into that darkness. Cast out of Eden, right? Just I can't turn in that direction. And that was a very hard thing for me. And I realized, though, I'll fix this. The problem was Honolulu. I'll get back to California. It'll all be different. And it was different, all right. And I got back there and I enrolled in high school one last time. I think I made it to about Halloween, and then I ended up dropping out and started my restaurant career, which, I didn't know that at the Wiener Schnitzel, that was my first restaurant job. And, I didn't know that I was going to do that work for the next 17 years. And the first 11 years of my sobriety. Nothing wrong with that, but I was never happy doing it. Always waiting for my real life to start, right? And gosh, I'm so grateful to you for many things, but I'm, up towards the top of the list. I'm very grateful for sponsors and mentors and old timers who have insisted I know the difference between a fantasy and a plan, who have expected things from me, who have held the bar for me just a little bit higher than I thought that I could reach, because I've risen to your level of expectation. And I'm really grateful for that. But I'm working there. I bought a car around this time, but of course, like everything else, right? Ready, fire, aim, no driver's license, no registration, no insurance. I don't even know how to drive, in fact. I found the car in the newspaper, got somebody to give me a ride. And it was a stick with an overdrive and a choke. That's a lot of motor skills. But so now I'm even more dangerous. And I met this guy, and he drank like I did. He didn't say things like other people were saying, like my mom says, can't come over anymore, or those splash marks on your wrist, or have you been drinking? It's only 9 a.m. He woke up with the shakes like me. Our first date was a double date. It was my best friend, Pam, and I. She also worked with the Wiener Schnitzel. And these two guys, and both of those guys are dead. Neither of them made it to 50. And when I got sober in 1985, Pam was strung out, living in a pickup truck, sneaking into UCSC to shower. And I think back just on that night alone and those 4 teenagers and how incredibly lucky I am, right, to be here with you in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sometimes I hope AA never gets in the way of the good life that it's given me, right? Sometimes it can look inconvenient, which is delusional. So I lost the Wiener Schnitzel job, which is possible. I want you to know, and had something to do with I'd been drinking on the beach all day. Showed up there anyway. I showed them. I went to the American Wiener Works, and I got a job over there. And that relationship with that guy is getting crazy and violent, and I don't know how to get out of that. And things are, the blackouts aren't so cute anymore. And that car, it just became this metaphor for my drinking. There was the window. Well, at first I lost the handle, right, for the window. And then you have to hold it up with a book of matches, but then you need the matches. And I remember when the window clunked down and shattered, and I thought, oh, thank God, right? You just keep lowering the bar. One less thing to figure out. And it's quite cold and rainy in Santa Cruz in the winter. And I flew off a curb one night and broke the tie rod, whatever that is. And there'd been an electrical fire. Big chunks of the carpet would come up, and the brake lights, it had no brake lights, but eventually it had no brakes. So what difference does that make? And I had this whole routine where I would downshift and use the emergency brake and put my, pump the brakes, downshift, use the emergency brake, put my foot out the door, maybe in that order, I don't know, but to stop the car. And things were getting, the walls were kind of closing in, and I had that, people were starting to die around me. And it felt, and that relationship, as I mentioned, with that guy was getting really kind of violent and crazy. And he started going to the penitentiary when we were like 18, and that became his life. He had a D number that he never got off parole until he wore out and died some years ago. But I had to get out of there. I had that feeling again, I got to go. And so, I had a particularly bad week. I'd been beaten up pretty badly by him, don't know how to get out of that situation. Came to one morning and my car was in my mom's garage, not a good sign. There were pieces missing off the car, which I've never found. And I found myself picking up the morning newspaper to see if I'd hit anyone or killed anyone. I borrowed my mom's car. I'm driving back around town to find those pieces. I never found them. And I can't even call my own drinking friends and say, hey, what happened last night? Ha, ha, ha. Because I don't even want them to know how out of control I am. And so I left that car in her garage. I didn't tell that guy where I was going. And that guy went to Honolulu because now surely that'll be the answer. And Santa Cruz is the problem. And I got a job as a cocktail waitress in a bar, and I started making great money for an 18-year-old high school dropout. And now I'm drinking in the bars, but I'm just crossing those lines. And by the time I'm 19, I'm on my fourth abortion. How has that happened? And I assure you, I never planned on living that way. And I don't see any way that I can redeem what my life has become. And I know those words like grace and redemption and forgiveness and reconciliation and atonement. I was raised in that, but those things cannot possibly be for me. And I felt that there are no off ramps, right? That I placed myself beyond any kind of grace. And that is a dark, dark place to be in. And I think that's what makes the light so particularly bright in Alcoholics Anonymous, because we all come out of our own particular forms of darkness. We have that, sometimes we look up words in our literature, right? Or in the big book, sponsor might have somebody look up words, and we have that phrase, pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. I don't think anyone in the history of AA has said, what does that mean? We just, we know it, we live it. There's a shorter word, Catholic word, perdition, spiritual ruin, loss of the soul. And those last few years of my drinking, I was 22 when I got sober. I spent in that state of perdition, in that state of spiritual ruin, feeling completely lost to, again, any kind of comfort or redemption or way out. And I'm now, the last couple of years of my drinking, I ended up drinking in the strip bars. I worked in Waikiki, and we'd go to each other's clubs and pump each other's tabs, but I can't predict my behavior anymore. And I don't know, I have a huge capacity for alcohol, but now maybe I'm just having like 2 or 3 drinks and I'm stumbling and slurring my words. My mind is staying sober. I can't get it in fast enough, but my body's getting drunk really quickly. And doormen are putting me in taxi cabs, or I'm being asked to leave places, or, and I don't, I don't know what's going to happen. I could, go into a blackout. I'd come to the next day and all my money would be gone, or I'd be covered in bruises. I had this married boyfriend that, in the short time that we would have together, I remember he found me in the neighborhood bar where I live. We went to my place before he had to go home to his wife. And my memory is that we had a great time, and he went home. The next day he said, I can't do this much longer. And I said, what do you mean? He said, where'd you go last night? What are you talking about? And he said, well, you came in, I thought you went to the restroom, and then the front door was open and you were gone. And I had just wandered off, at, 2 in the morning, into the night, in not a great area of Honolulu. And I can't account for those hours. And that was happening more and more. And, that is a scary place to be. And drinking in those strip bars, I could look at the women on stage and think, well, at least I'm not doing that, and I can't now, because in the nightclubs, you might want me to do something like dance or have a conversation, and I am not there for those reasons. I am there to drink. And so those strip bars, I could think, well, they're open till 4 a.m. They reopen at 6 a.m. I could look at the women on stage and think, well, at least I'm not doing that. And very low expectations, right? Some of us seek out sordid places. And there I was, 22 years old, about 85 pounds. My hair is falling out. My gums are receded from malnutrition. And all that stuff that happens to us in end-stage alcoholism is happening to me. I don't know if the alcohol is taking me to crazy or keeping me from going there. I'm hearing voices and things clawing on my skin. And, I'm waking up in the night in a full-throated scream, and I'm convinced there's somebody under my bed or out on my lanai. And vomiting liver bile, just all that crazy stuff. And my married boyfriend was starting to not want to come around because the way that I lived, he was always, complaining about stuff. And so it seemed to me. And This apartment was a lot like the house I grew up in, and I was never going to live that way. It was between the Honolulu City bus yard and the Kenau Street freeway off-ramp, the cinder block building. We had broken out windows. I was my alcoholic sister and my nephew, who was 6 years old at the time. He's sober today. And there were feral cats that lived in the bus yard, and they'd come through our broken windows and eat out of the trash and spray all over. And there's this big wet spot in the carpet by the front door. And, now I'd call a plumber. I might have to call my sponsor and say, hey, I'm going to call the plumber and call you back. No, I don't know why I'm afraid to call a plumber. That's just, we're interesting people, right? I mean, we can do time, be thrown out of moving cars, crazy stuff, but open my mail, call a plumber, God, terror. And thank God, if this room was dark tonight, I would be in a hell of a spot. Right? Because you understand me. My wound is your medicine and vice versa. Thank God that we have each other, because I know you understand. And, I love that in a doctor's opinion where he says the alcoholic's problems pile up on him and become astonishingly difficult to solve. It's not the big stuff. It's not how does a 15-year-old kid, navigate her way through living in a big city and enrolling in high school by herself. No, it's calling the plumber. Astonishingly difficult to solve. And my phone was a pay phone at a liquor store, and I'd stopped driving after I left Santa Cruz that last time. And what I can see now is that everything that got in between me and my drinking fell away. I couldn't go in that liquor store because I'd made a scene, and I would use their payphone though. But the next closest liquor store meant I would run across that Kenau Street freeway off ramp. I'd scramble up an embankment, cut through a hole in a chain link fence because where the liquor store was, and we just make those adjustments, right? It never occurred to me there's anything unusual about that. You just keep lowering the bar. And that day came for me, just kind of nothing was working. A few days before that or so, my boyfriend had come over, as I mentioned, and I had some stitches on my ankle because things happen when you're out there. And I'd been at the hospital the night before, and they'd stitched me up and set me on my way. And he came over and he said, look at your ankle. And it was covered with fleas. And I always want to share that if I have an opportunity to speak, just in case I ever think there's any glamour left in a cocktail for me. That is who came to you in 1985. And you have given me an extraordinary life. So this particular day, typical day, racing brain, Bill describes us so well in so many ways, isolated and alone in our self-constructed prisons, quicksand stretched all around, that terrible, the four horsemen, I saw it on a t-shirt tonight. They were after me. And I'm, trying to keep some vodka down while I'm vomiting liver bile, and I can't get it right. And I started to pray, and I hadn't been able to do that in a long time. I had rosary in one hand, the vodka in the other, and I believe that prayer sent me to the payphone at the liquor store. I found my feet moving. I really didn't have anybody to call. I called my boss, and he was a drinking buddy who came and got me, and he saw me, I'm sick and shaking. He said, let's go get a drink. And I said, no, take me to the hospital. And I wasn't planning on saying those words, but that's what I said. And that's what he did. And I saw a nurse, and I said to her, I can probably stop the cocaine, but I can't stop drinking. And she said, my boyfriend's an alcoholic and he goes to AA. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a little hasty. It's not that bad, but I said that out loud to another human being. I can't stop drinking. Admission of complete defeat. And I can see in hindsight how my life has never been the same. It wasn't one alcoholic talking to another, but it was close enough. I can't stop drinking. Step one. And then I saw a doctor. I did not get the sympathy and the Valium that I thought was due to me. He said, you're an alcoholic and an addict, he said, and we can't help you. And he gave me, I wish I would have saved it. And my memory is it was one piece of paper, and it had central office, treatment centers, national council, a resource sheet. And I found myself going to the payphone at the liquor store and making some calls. And I remember a woman saying, we don't have a bed, but you go to this place tonight. That's all I remember. She did not, I don't think she said it was an AA meeting. She just said, go to this place tonight. It turned out it was an AA meeting at the Salvation Army Detox up on the Poly Highway. And I got somebody to give me a ride and I walked into my first AA meeting. Now, why would I do that? Some random voice on the end of a payphone saying, go to this place. I didn't know what the place was or what I was going to find there. There's only one time you can, when you're in a state of complete surrender. And I was willing to try it somebody else's way. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. But I did it anyway. I love something else in the book about, where it talks about what at first seemed like a slender reed turned out to be the loving and powerful hand of God, our creator. And I always listen for those slender reeds in our stories, right? And that was certainly one of mine. And I walked into that meeting. I don't remember anything really, except I knew I'd stepped into the light. That's how I felt 40 years ago. It's how I felt tonight. I knew that you suffer from what I suffered from. And I could see that you were free men and women. I believed you. And as cynical and broken as I was, the fact that there was something I could believe in was that in itself, it was undeniable, the spirit that was in the room. And so I kept coming. And I got a sponsor and a home group. My home group was the Steps to Freedom group. We met on Tuesday nights, and I got involved with, they were all very active people in Alcoholics Anonymous. They had sponsors. They sponsored others. They fellowship. They were of service. They used to say a lot in those days, hang with the winners. I had no idea what that meant, but they did. And they knew I was new, and they said, come with us. And I got a sponsor, and I began working those steps, which terrified me. But I knew too that I'm very fortunate that obsession was just taken from me. And so I knew that I was living in a state of grace. I wasn't drinking. I did not do that. You did not do that. Something did that. And I was able to turn in the direction of a God of my understanding, right? And move through steps 1, 2, and 3 and do that first inventory that terrified me. But I think when my sponsor then received that and sat in the mercy seat. And that's when I really felt like a member in good standing of Alcoholics Anonymous, when I did that first inventory. And I moved to LA when I had about, 3 years, and kind of floundered for a while, and eventually became a member of the group that I'm a member of still today. And I was waitressing with this woman, Mary Ann, and fine member of the class of 1969. She's still alive. I'm her power of attorney. And she said, there's a little meeting I go to on Monday nights. Why don't you come? And thank God that when Monday night came around, because I really got into some trouble with not getting like regular meetings and stuff. And when Monday came around, I didn't have a better idea. One more time, I'd been beaten into a state of reasonableness. And I went and I sat down next to her. And tomorrow night, I'll be sitting in that same seat at Monday Night, Ohio. And she said, start looking around for a sponsor here. And somebody just said, ask her. And I know some of you remember Karen Garrison. And I asked Karen. And first thing she said was, I expect a lot from the people I sponsor. That's what she said. Honey, I expect a lot from the people I sponsor. And because of I was really struggling. And she said, with your amount of sobriety, we're going to go through the steps again. I want you to get regular meetings on, I think she said 4 meetings a week, and get commitments at those meetings, get a phone commitment at central office, get an H&I panel, call me on a regular basis, get involved with the other women you sponsor. I thought, I picked the wrong sponsor. This woman's answers seemed to have nothing to do with my current problems. But of course, those problems died of neglect, right? And Karen knew that stuff was going to get me in the middle of the room where I desperately needed to be. There's a lot of bodies today between me and that door. Oh, excuse me. And that's thanks to her. And that second big inventory I did with her, one of the things that came out on that was that I was ashamed of the fact that I only had an 8th grade education, and I felt really stuck, and I was still waiting tables. But now I'm in meetings like this, right? And you're hearing people like Clint. I was living in a garage. Now I'm a lawyer. Like, oh my God, if I come to enough of these meetings, I'll be a lawyer too. This is great. Karen said, no, God only does for us what we can't do for ourselves. Get your high school diploma. Like, high school diploma, one, I know I can't. GED, I can't pass that. And on the other hand, A GED, really? How about a PhD, right? There's no middle ground for me. And I learned a big lesson though in doing that, that the action doesn't care how contemptuous you are of it. It just mattered that I took it. I thought that was stupid and dumb and had no bearing on my life. In fact, I didn't even know that it mattered until I had the letter in my hand from the state of California, 6 years sober, 28 years old, saying, congratulations, you're a high school graduate. That's when I knew it mattered. I had to take the action first. Started going to community college. It was my third one. I'm a great starter. I can't finish. You taught me how to finish. Those dumb jobs at my meetings taught me how to finish. I eventually transferred to UCLA in June of 97. It's been a long time now. I was 33 and 11 years sober. I haven't been a rocket to stardom. It took me a long time. I graduated, got my first degree at UCLA, and I got to give the commencement address at that graduation. My mom got to sit in the VIP section. She had her scholar back. It was a long wait, but she took it. And I took a job teaching special ed middle school that I knew was absolutely the wrong job, but a friend was working there. I needed a job because I wanted to teach for a year and go to graduate school. And my plan was to teach at community college, and took this job. By then, my sponsor is Marion Walleen, and she said, you could be of service there. In your heart, that's where you're supposed to be. And when she did say that, I did know in my heart that's where I was supposed to be, but that's not the answer I want, right? When I'm praying for the fear to be removed, I mean, make me not afraid and send me a paycheck that's right next door, or, I don't mean like make me walk through the fear, right? With some big kid in my face saying, I'll pimp slap you, be like, it's not what I meant. Surely God's will is going to be less of a commute. There'll be books, and that's not what it was. I did that for a year, really hard, but very satisfying. And I had my plan, and I to go to graduate school, and I did that. I moved up to Palo Alto, and I got a master's at Stanford, and ended up on the faculty at the community college where my sponsor sent me to take one class, and I was so sure that's what I wanted to do, but I found that my heart was really teaching special ed middle school, and that's largely the profession that I've just retired from on Friday. And and that stupid GED turned into a bachelor's and a master's and 2 teaching credentials, and one very tired woman who didn't pay off her student loans until she was 60. But here I stand. Those pregnancies that I terminated, that some amends cannot be made directly, right? But I have worked with thousands now of lots of unwanted kids, a lot of kids in the system. The foster families don't want them there in group homes. Teachers don't want them in their classroom. Judges don't want them in their courtrooms. And working with those unwanted kids was a way for me to balance those scales with those unwanted pregnancies. And I could have missed that, man. If I would have said to my sponsor, I'll teach, but not there, not that, right? I didn't put any conditions on it. And I think that when I'm surrendered and someone else is willing to serve, that God can come in that Trinity, right? That third place. And I'm so glad I didn't miss that, because that gave me a level of freedom I didn't know was possible. And I was single for Debbie is my longest serving Valentine. I was single for had some long-term relationships, but mostly single. I just thought that wasn't for me. And then I met Mike, and Mike walked off of Skid Row into the Midnight Mission. He was 53 years old. His Social Security statement had 32 years of zero. So that gives you an idea. He did a lot of time in the penitentiary, and we started working for Clancy his first day on the mission, and became a really well-respected member of our home group. And we started dating when I had 6 years, and we fell in love, and we were just astounded that in middle age, this great thing came along, and we bought a house right on the Pasadena Altadena line, and got engaged. And within about a month of being in the house, it was clear that Mike was sick, and that started this odyssey of, tests and stuff. And eventually we got to City of Hope, rolled around Cancer Hospital, 10 miles from us. Great, they'll fix it. And in the interim, our house had bed bugs. We had to move out, and we're trying to get second opinions, and he's sick, and it's a hard time. But anyway, we got to City of Hope, and they said, you have 6 to 10 months. And we got 10 months. And I remember thinking like, no, that is not how this goes. I am the high school dropout that went to Stanford. That's how this is going to go. That's not the trajectory. And the serenity prayer is great for stuff like traffic. But what about stuff that's unacceptable, right? This was unacceptable, but it was happening. And of course, anyone who's been around here, and if you're new, listen closely. In Alcoholics Anonymous, sorrow does not come alone. And thank God that we had dropped anchor in a home group deep and wide. It comes with all of you, right? And nobody had the magic wand to make liver cancer go away, but boy, they could show up, right? And walk with us through that. And they did. And, we were already engaged, so we wanted to be married. And our home group put on a wedding for us in Clancy's backyard. And for 269 days, I was Mike's wife. And then he passed away in our home, with myself on one side and his best friend Lewis on the other. And that was a hard time. My dad died a week after that. And then we put our dog down a week after that. It was just a hard time. But I knew that no matter how far out into those dark waters of grief I would have to wade. And for me, I did. It was something that needed tending to, like alcoholism, that one of you would be there. This is the way back. I've been here too, right? That house that Mike and I purchased, I mentioned, right on the Pasadena Altadena line. It's standing. My neighborhood burned down, right, in the Eaton fire a year ago, January, and I'm not in the house. It's working on being repaired. I didn't lose the whole house, thank God. But everything across the street is gone. The whole known landscape of your daily life, right? Your bank, your post office, the hardware store, your dentist, the burrito place, just erasure, 22 square miles. And that's unsettling. I don't like that a bit, not one bit. I don't want to accept it. I don't like it, and all the things that come along with that. But there it is, I didn't think that retirement would look like a dead husband and a burned down neighborhood, but there it is. Sometimes you're going along, and yes, we live a day at a time, but it's okay to have vision too, as Bill said. And you think it's going to be this way, and then you're swallowed by a whale, and in the whale is liver cancer and an urban conflagration. And you just think, God, let me out of here. This is not the direction I want to go in. Let me out of here. But that's not the way it goes, right? And it puts you out on a different shore. And what do? You learn to accept it and make peace with that. And thank God, not only have you taught me that I have to learn to fit myself to the world, and I can't demand that the world fit itself to me. But you have showed me that, right? We live our lives out loud here. Well, I've watched people walk through all kinds of horrors, and here we are. And it doesn't, I can shake my tiny fist at God, but what a waste of time and a futile effort that is, because I need God. And it's, I remember thinking, like, why would God, when Mike got sick, invite us to this banquet and take it away after like 3 bites? But I don't think God works that way. I don't quite know how God works, but I know it's not that. This is a story. It'd be nice to have a happy ending. There is still, in my shattered heart, there is still plenty of room for gratitude, for joy, for new beginnings, for all the stuff that comes along with a life, right? Alcoholics Anonymous has given me the ability to be in the game, it's the portion of every human life that there's going to be loss and hard times. There it is. But I'm here for it, right? I'm to be a daughter and a wife and a homeowner and all of those things. I don't know. Oh, I love this little bit of a poem. I think it's such a beautiful metaphor for Alcoholics Anonymous. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole world. And I think that fits AA so perfectly. There's another Padraig O'Tuma, Irish poet. One of his lines is something like, let's take the stones that we stumble over and build altars. And isn't that so? Those very things, those very secrets, those big stones become freedom for someone else, right? Become that altar. We don't regret the past or wish to shut the door on it, because that past has to be here so someone else can see, oh, I did that too. I can get free too. And I think if you're new, you owe us nothing. We don't want anything from you. We would love for you to have what we found here, if you'll have it. There's tools at your disposal. We can't give it to you. You have to pick those up yourself. I hope you take that risk. I have bet my life on what goes on here, and it has paid off handsomely for me. It really has. I want to thank you again, just, for taking this ride with me tonight, for being so present. And I want to thank you for who you've been all the days leading up to this one, and who you'll be all the days to come. I'll certainly need you, and thank you for my life.